It's a real pleasure for me to introduce as a keynote speaker of the day, Nils Røkke. Nils is, well, first of all, he's part of the external advisory board of the GSEU. Then he's also the executive vice president sustainability at the SINTEF and also the president of ERA, the European Energy Research Alliance. He's also a contributor for Forbes, writing on energy and climate issues and actively taking part in the public debate of energy transition. Please join me in welcoming Nils with us.
And thank you, and what a privilege to stand here today to present for you some of the drivers behind what you are trying to supply to the market and the knowledge which is needed to make that happen. And I cannot resist, just to show, and I was told to point in that direction, and I'm not quite sure if that works really. Oh, there you go. Use a couple of seconds just to show you what is ERA, the European Energy Research Alliance. As it says here, the largest energy research community in Europe. We assemble about 50,000 people in energy research totally through our partnership of 250 partners in Europe, 30 countries, and 18 joint programs. And the mission of catalyzing energy research for a climate-neutral society by 2050. Further on, being the privileged authority towards energy research in Europe. And this shows our 18 joint programs. They span from materials, which have been discussed here today, of course, to the different low carbon technologies, which you also see here. I won't go into detail on all this, but and also the system part of it, how it all binds together with SSH type of activities as well. And we've got a cross-cutting joint program on digital, and we're thinking about critical raw materials. That's also one of these kind of cross-cutting things that we may establish in the future, but it's integral to many of our joint programs. Before I go into details here, I think all the items we're discussing in energy really evolves around this triangle, the energy trilemma. At the top, you see the sustainability part with climate and environment. You see at the left corner the security of supply and the competitiveness. And in the good situation, these are in balance. And what was the situation like 3 years ago? Well, very strong focus on climate and environment, driven by European policies, very commendable so, and also on competitiveness, whereas security of supply was more or less seen as given. That was not a problem. Then we had the Ukraine crisis, and of course security of supply was not given anymore. And much more efforts are put into keeping lights on, the heat on, and I would say really commendable as well that the EU has put up kept up their policies on the Green Deal and what we're going to do to get to a climate neutral Europe. So it has kind of shifted, and the competitiveness is maybe not that focused these days, but it comes with that kind of driver as well. I think there's been a huge difference since the pipelines have been cut. But now, of course, we're talking about getting rid of one reliance, which was on natural gas from Russia, to other kind of reliances, which, right, one which works, excellent. Other kind of reliances, which is due to the raw materials and the supply chains. So that's the kind of backdrop. That's going backwards, right. Well, then we have all the reports coming up. There's pouring out reports about how can we reach the 1.5 degree. We had an unusually optimistic, I would say, report coming out about 2 weeks ago from the IEA saying that the 1.5 is still a possibility. There's a narrow path to that, but it's still a possibility, and the growth we have seen in renewables. Last week we got this report from DNV saying that when we're not forcing the solution, saying it has to be within the 1.5 or below 2 degrees, it's more likely, if you look to scenarios and extrapolations and the data we got, that we're more likely to reach to come to a 2.2 degree scenario, which is not very good message to receive, given that the last months we have seen a growth of about 1.73 degrees actually already on the monthly resolution. And then you got Guterres and UNFCCC, which has used up its vocabulary really about how bad this is, opening the gates to hell, and but still saying that this is a possibility if we do really, it actually works well, really make an effort. And this is then based on these kind of curves showing the historical growth in emissions. These are total global greenhouse gases. You know the record here, and you see the effect of the Paris Agreement at the top, what we would have, where we would have been if we, maybe it even has a, this is where we would have been if we didn't have the Paris Agreement, and this is where we are targeting now with the national determined contributions. So that's good. I mean, what would it be without the Paris Agreement? But look at the gaps here towards the 2 degree, which is this curve, and this is the 1.5 degree. And bear in mind that this is with 50% chance of reaching targets. This is 2 degrees, and we are lacking about 20 to 24 gigatons of reductions to be on track. So it's really a huge challenge in front of us here. So I'm then presenting you a bit of word pun on this, like nothing is possible, or is actually nothing possible. Nothing means zero is possible. Net zero is possible. Did you get it? Yeah? I spoke to our own conference and nobody understood it actually, so you must be smarter, Excellent. And this is then the curve from the IEA saying how we need to then remove CO2 emissions from the energy sector. You see all the different activities we need to undertake, like no need for new oil and gas fields, and not to mention about coal. The key global ambitions is to make everything renewable, and electrification will play a huge role in that, including so not only zero-emission electrons, but also molecules. The advanced economies would need to take their share earlier than the emerging economies, and looking forward then to 2050, a power generation system which is 90% renewable, nuclear capacity doubled, energy consumption 50% electrified, and annual removals of 1.7 gigaton of CO2. So quite a travel in front of us here, and also reminding us that if you're late, and many would say, I mean the previous slides showing that we could be late, if we delay this, if we don't peak between now and 2025, and we delay this curve, well, you need to have more and more removals, which is a really stupid way of doing it, but that's we need to remove at the end. But how much we need to remove? If we don't stick to that, we need to remove more, meaning storing CO2 in the subsurface or in the natural sinks. So how to reach this? Well, we need to, first of all, the investment in renewable energy has increased significantly, but we need almost to triple this to 2030. So to $4.5 trillion US. May sound like a huge number, but what is the budget of the US is about 6.5 trillion US dollars. So it's not impossible to do this, and you would almost think it was worth to do that to avoid a boiling planet. And the figure at the right here shows, of course, how fossil fuels need to be phased out and the growth of clean energy. Some of the optimism, which you can see in this report from IEA, is coming from two features. First of all, electric car sales, which have boomed at the global scale. 2 years ago, when they did this basic report, the NZE 2050 report in 2021, and now is the update in 2023. 2 years ago, 1 out of 25 new cars sold in the world was electric. Now it's 1 out of 5. That's credible growth over a very short time. It's almost like a delta function. It goes through the roof here. So that's a positive drive, of course, but it comes with all the materials which you need to replace and to have for this to happen and to go to every car. I mean, in my country, 9 out of 10 new cars sold are electric. And this, at the right, it's solar, so PV, and how this has grown. And the optimism can also be spurred here. On the two top bars, you see solar PV and batteries. But the optimism is also based a lot upon what is said, announced projects, the yellow one. It's very seldom that you get all the announced projects to fruition, that they actually happen. And if you look at the lower part here, you see for wind, for instance, and electrolyzers, a lot of that is in the yellow, which is based, of course, on hydrogen production. And for wind, it's a big concern, I think, because wind is so important and equally important as PV if we look to the global picture. Because this is where we need to end up in 2050. We see the PV and look at the, sorry for the poor picture, but the 2022 figures are the one to the left on each of these groups, you know. So it has to grow tremendously. Reflecting on that, the total global production today of electricity is 25,000 terawatt hours. Each of these have to deliver that, both wind and solar. And then there are the others, which I don't have time to go through. But messages also need to have unabated fossil fuels if we're going to use them, and the use of the renewables, obviously. Good news is that looking to the price, both solar and wind has fared very well in dropping prices. Depending, of course, that you have the materials and the possibilities to deploy these at the scale needed. But we see the solar curve is a bit ridiculous to compare it to 1976, of course, when PV was like jewelry. But now it's very competitive, and as you see on the right here, the average global cost of solar and PV, solar and wind. It's really the cheapest you can have on the average level, and in many regions in the world, that's also the case. Also the case for Europe. This is the additions on wind, as we see in the global scale. Just look at China, how much they have added on wind, and we are afraid, of course, that you will have the same situation as with PV, with the pump and dump kind of strategy the Chinese used. Just flood the market with PV, and the European PV producers had the problem. We're seeing the same now in the wind area, where the dropping the prices, and you can almost get half the price on some of the equipment from China compared to the European manufacturers, which is a huge problem, of course. We're calling this non-economic markets, actually. It's an interesting word, I think. And this is just proving the point. This is from Financial Times, showing the materials which go into wind turbines. I mean, these it's quite an achievement that Europe have 54 it says or something, 58% of the wind turbines in the world. But this is completely depending on the value chain and supplies from China. And permanent magnets, and by the way, they're also using motors, of course. So that is also, when you talk about chemical kinetics, what is the determining step? Well, obviously the supplies chain of these. and this causes the perfect backdrop for trade wars and the like. And this is also a drive towards not experiencing the same as we have experienced for the PV. And now also see the Critical Raw Material Act, we see the Net Zero Industrial Act talking about reshoring a lot of these technologies to Europe. Very commendable. So, are we going to reach these targets? Well, we need to triple the renewable installed capacity, notably by those technologies I just mentioned. Not to forget the energy efficiency improvement, which is also a very, very important and less controversial thing than to deploy renewable, which we know takes a lot of area, and you come into conflict on this nature and biodiversity land use. And well, the right one is mainly on the oil and gas industry need to stop their methane emissions, which is a very strong driver for the short-term climate projections. Which then ends up in this slide, very contentious issue to talk about rethinking growth. Is growth the answer to all? We know our economies today is based on this constant growth. Do we need to think other kind of ideas for our economy? Post-growth, degrowth, regenerative growth. I posted this in Forbes about 1.5 to 2 months ago, and boy, did I have feedback on that one, Like, where is this guy going to get his pensions from, and what is he feeding his children, So it's really contentious. This is largely read in the US, and we know it's almost a partisan issue there. And I think that's a discussion we also need to have. And we at ERA had its 15-year anniversary and the conference this week, on Tuesday actually. We launched 2 reports. One was about energy demand reduction, and the other one is securing sustainable critical raw materials for clean energy in Europe. And I'd advise you to have a look at those reports, and I hope you will find them interesting. I'll just end my presentation with a statement in the IEA report, which reads, "We are confronted with the fierce urgency now." It's actually taken from Martin Luther King. And this is a time for vigorous and positive action, and indeed it is. I think it's key that organizations like ours and the Geoservices is strengthened as an effort to make this happen. Thank you.